Picture a forest canopy so incredibly thick that even at high noon, the ground below is just plunged into total darkness.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Right, and you are walking through a landscape where rivers become so violent during the monsoon that they literally swallow entire roads, just cutting off civilization for weeks at a time.
Completely off the grid.
Exactly, and you're constantly surrounded by invisible eyes in the branches above you. A single swipe from a creature hiding in the rocky caves along your path can be instantly fatal.
That sounds terrifying.
It is, and somewhere out there, moving silently through the shadows, is an endangered, almost prehistoric-looking beast with a terrifying 2-meter horn span.
See, I mean, it sounds like a fabricated setting for some kind of, fantasy novel or something, but this place is entirely real.
It really is.
Yeah, so welcome to our deep dive into the secrets of Maharashtra's easternmost district, Gadchiroli. It's an area so dense and just wildly untamed that biologists and explorers often refer to it as Maharashtra's Amazon.
Yeah, and our primary source for this deep dive today is a really fascinating, comprehensive breakdown from Jangal Diary. They've documented how this untouched wilderness somehow managed to survive centuries of relentless logging.
Which is a miracle in itself.
Right, and they explain why scientists from all over the world are traveling there right now to study a mystery that local tribes have guarded for millennia.
Yeah, and that's a narrative that, quite honestly, largely goes untold. I mean, when most people hear the name Gadchiroli, they immediately associate it with its darker political history.
Right, the Maoist insurgency.
Exactly. Specifically, this long-running armed insurgency that has just dominated headlines for decades. The threat of that political conflict created this sort of permanent shadow over the region.
For sure.
But ironically, that same shadow acted as a deterrent. It kept the outside world at bay and ended up preserving one of the most incredible biological time capsules left on this planet.
So let's unpack the sheer scale of this biological time capsule, because if we want to understand how this specific forest survived while the rest of India was, rapidly modernized and heavily logged.
Totally decimated in some parts.
Right, we have to look at the geography itself. So Gadchiroli borders the states of Chhattisgarh and Telangana, and a staggering 75 to 80% of its entire landmass is covered by these deep, silent woods.
Yeah, and that density, it's not just an accident of nature, it's a profound historical legacy. I mean, for centuries, this entire region was ruled by the Gond kings.
The indigenous community there.
Exactly. The Gonds have lived inside these woods for thousands of years, and their perspective on the forest is fundamentally different from the industrialized world.
How so?
Well, they never viewed the forest as a static resource, or like a timber yard just waiting to be harvested. To the Gond, the forest was a living mother. It was literally a deity.
Which obviously protected it culturally. But then the British Empire arrived in India, and we all know their track record with forests.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
No, not at all. They essentially viewed the Indian subcontinent as this unlimited hardware store. They clear-cut ancient timber all across the country to build ships, lay railway tracks, basically just fuel an empire.
Right.
Yet somehow, Gadchiroli largely escaped the British saws.
Well, the British absolutely wanted the timber in Gadchiroli, let's be clear about that. But they avoided it because it was too terrifying to penetrate on a massive industrial scale.
Too hostile.
Exactly. The sheer density of the vegetation, the unforgiving rocky terrain, the unpredictable monsoon floods we talked about, and, most importantly, the apex predators.
Right, the biological security system.
Yeah, the colonial loggers essentially looked at the logistics and decided the human cost of extracting that timber was simply too high.
It's like the geography itself was an active defense system.
Yep.
We tend to think of a forest as this passive environment that just sits there waiting to be cut down. But Gadchiroli acted more like an unhackable ancient vault.
I love that analogy, unhackable vault.
Yeah. I mean, a bank vault relies on thick steel walls to keep intruders out. Gadchiroli's security system was its hostile terrain and the biological sentinels patrolling its borders.
And that brings us to the creatures that actually rule this space. Because the lineup of predators acting as those biological sentinels is deeply, deeply intimidating.
Okay, let's walk through that lineup, because it is wild. First, you have the tigers. The famous Tadoba and Dari Tiger Reserve borders Gadchiroli, but there are no physical walls or fences.
Right, animals don't respect borders.
Exactly. Tigers cross over into the Gadchiroli forests whenever they please. The source material mentions that locals finding fresh, tiger pug marks right at the edge of their village boundaries is just considered a completely ordinary morning.
Just another Tuesday for them.
Right. And adding to that, you have leopards.
Oh yeah, and the source material highlights that leopards are even more pervasive. There are significantly more leopards in Gacciaroli than tigers, and they operate very differently.
They're more stealthy, right?
Exactly. They are essentially the invisible watchers of the canopy. They observe human movement from the high branches during the day, entirely unseen, just blending perfectly into the gappled shadows, and then they hunt at night.
That is unsettling. Then you have the Indian bison, locally known as the gaur, and this animal just redefines the concept of megafauna.
Oh, absolutely massive.
We're talking about the largest wild bovine species in the world. A mature male can stand 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh up to 1,000 kilograms.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the combined weight of 10 to 12 adult humans, packed into a single, highly muscular animal that is known to literally flip off-road vehicles when it feels threatened.
Yeah, the physical presence of a gaur herd is overwhelming.
Yeah.
If they decide to block a forest path, they don't move. You are the one who turns around and finds another route.
Right. So if I am walking through a pitch-black forest with no flashlight, my immediate assumption is that stumbling into a 1,000-kilo jeep-flipping bison or a stealthy leopard dropping from a tree is the ultimate nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
Like that feels like an instant game over for a human being.
Your intuition makes total sense, but the reality on the ground is completely different. The local tribes, the people who actually navigate these paths every single night, they do not consider the tiger, the leopard, or the massive bison to be their primary threat.
Wait, really? None of them?
Nope. The animal that instills most genuine fear in the local population is the sloth bear.
The bear. Taking the top spot over an apex ambush predator like a tiger. That feels so counterintuitive.
It does, but it comes down to a crucial difference in animal psychology and evolutionary defense mechanisms. So a tiger, despite its immense power, is a calculated, strategic hunter.
Right, it weighs the risks.
Exactly. If a tiger sees a human walking down a path and it isn't actively hunting for prey, its instinct is to avoid the conflict. It will silently retreat into the brush or hide until the human passes. A tiger avoids unnecessary risk because, an injury in the wild equals starvation.
So they assess the threat and choose flight over fight whenever possible.
Exactly. But the sloth bear operates on an entirely different software program. They have relatively poor eyesight and hearing, and they nest in the rocky caves and crevices scattered throughout the forest floor.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. Because they can't detect you from far away, humans often end up startling them at an incredibly close range. And when a sloth bear is surprised, its immediate reaction is not to retreat. It engages in explosive, hyper-aggressive defense.
Wow. It's essentially a biological tripwire. Like, a tripwire doesn't assess whether you meant to step on it, it doesn't calculate the risk, it just detonates.
That is a perfect analogy. The bear detonates. It attacks head-on, swinging wildly. And you have to consider their anatomy.
With our claws.
Yes, sloth bears have evolved these incredibly long, thick, curved claws designed specifically for tearing through rock-hard termite mounds.
Ouch.
Right, so a single defensive swipe with those claws will bring a human to the ground instantly. The sheer unpredictability and explosive ferocity of that defense mechanism makes them the most dangerous encounter in the dark.
Which is wild. And navigating a forest filled with biological tripwires brings up a massive paradox regarding the people who live there.
How so?
Well, we've established this environment is incredibly lethal, completely dark under the canopy, and actively repelled the British Empire. Yet, the Madhya and Gond tribes have coexisted with these lethal animals for thousands of years.
Right.
To understand their survival, we have to look at how extremely off the grid their daily reality actually is.
Yeah, and we mean off-grid in the most literal sense of the term here. The Madhya tribe lives so deep inside the forest interior that paved roads do not reach them.
None at all.
None. They operate entirely without a municipal electrical grid. Internet access is completely non-existent. They are navigating an unplugged reality surrounded by apex predators.
I do want to challenge the framing of this slightly, though.
Okay, go ahead.
When we talk about indigenous groups living without paved roads, electricity, or modern hospitals in the 21st century, there's a tendency to romanticize what is actually just severe systemic poverty.
That's a fair point.
Like, are we looking at a group of people who are masters of their domain? Or are we looking at a marginalized community that has simply been left behind by the modern world?
I totally get why you'd ask that. Framing it as modern urban poverty is a very common misconception. But the source material reframes this entirely.
How do they see it?
To the Media and Gan tribes, the forest is not a place of lack or a symptom of being left behind. The forest operates as a booming, highly complex, self-sustaining economy.
Interesting.
They survive not because they are helpless, but because they rely on an inherited database of highly specialized empirical knowledge that they've gathered over millennia.
Okay, let's ground that in a concrete example, because if someone in the village falls seriously ill, and there is no modern pharmacy or hospital within a day's travel, how does that specialized knowledge actually manifest?
It manifests through field-tested botany. They know precisely which specific tree bark needs to be harvested and boiled down to cure a severe malarial fever.
Wow, malaria.
Yeah. And even more impressively, they know exactly which combinations of leaves, when crushed and applied immediately to a bite wound, can neutralize the venom of a Russell's viper.
Oh my gosh, which is significant because the Russell's viper is highly prevalent in that region and is responsible for some of the highest rates of human snakebite fatalities on the continent.
Exactly. It's incredibly deadly.
The venom causes catastrophic internal bleeding. So knowing the exact counteragent leaf isn't just quaint folklore, it is a life-saving pharmacological science applied in real time.
That's exactly what it is. And they apply that same level of scientific observation to the predators.
Like tracking the tigers.
Yep. They map the behavior of the wildlife so accurately that they know the specific atmospheric conditions and nights when tigers are most likely to use certain paths for hunting.
That's incredible.
And they adjust their movement patterns accordingly. This represents mastery of a complex environment, not poverty.
But survival is only half of the equation. There's also the question of livelihood. The source material mentions they participate in an economy, generating incomes to sustain their families.
Right.
If they are entirely off the electrical grid and isolated from cities, how are they generating financial stability?
Their economy is built entirely on localized natural resources that interface with the outside world through seasonal gathering. A prime example is the mahua tree.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah. The blooming of the mahua tree is a massive cultural event. It provides a staple food source, it could be fermented, and it sits at the absolute center of their seasonal festivals.
Very cool.
But the real financial engine is the tendu leaf.
Right, the tendu leaf is traditionally used across South Asia for rolling bidas, the local hand-rolled cigarettes.
Exactly. Gathering tendu leaves serves as the financial backbone for hundreds of thousands of tribal families in the wider region. During the specific harvest season, families gather these leaves from the forest and trade them through seasonal forest markets or designated intermediaries.
And that sustains them.
Yeah. The income generated from that single sustainable harvest can often provide financial stability for an entire year.
The Jangal Diary breakdown also heavily emphasizes the role of bamboo. The bamboo in Gachiroli grows at an astonishing rate, like several centimeters in a single day.
That's incredibly fast.
It acts as the structural steel of their society. They construct their homes from it, weave intricate baskets and storage units, and even harvest the fresh shoots as a highly nutritious food source.
So when you synthesize all of that, the medicinal mastery, the mahua harvest, the tendu leaf economy, and the rapid growth bamboo, you realize they're operating a highly functional, circular society.
They aren't just waiting for modern infrastructure to save them.
No, not at all. They are actively managing an ecosystem that provides absolutely everything they need.
But that immense natural value introduces a very serious threat. If this forest is packed with highly valuable resources, what stops it from being violently exploited? Exactly. History shows us that wherever a massive amount of natural wealth exists, devastating greed usually follows, whether from outside corporations or even individuals within the community looking for a quick profit.
And that threat is most deeply concentrated on a resource known locally as green gold. In Gachiroli, green gold refers to the towering teak trees, or sagan.
Ah, teak wood. It's globally prized because of its natural oils, right? It remains completely rot-free and weather-resistant for hundreds of years.
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable. The sheer volume of old-growth teak standing in Gachiroli is easily worth tens of millions of dollars on the international market.
With that kind of staggering financial incentive, you would expect the forest to be completely clear-cut by illegal logging syndicates.
You would. But the secret to its survival lies in a highly unique tribal conservation system centered around a single community figure. He's known as the Gaita.
The Gaita. So he functions as the village elder, but their role seems to go much deeper than just settling local disputes.
Oh, much deeper. The Gaita is the ultimate guardian of the ecosystem. The Media tribe does not just walk into the forest with axes and take whatever they want. They actively seek permission from the forest through the Gaeta.
Wow, they actually asked permission.
Yes. He assesses the seasonal health of the woods and dictates precisely which specific trees can be harvested. And crucially, he decides during which season they can be cut to ensure the forest regenerates. His word is absolute law within the community.
That functions entirely differently from modern conservation. I mean, today, governments rely on a top-down approach, strict legal penalties, massive financial fines, and armed forest rangers to enforce environmental protection.
And we know how well that works.
Exactly. Those systems frequently fail. Illegal logging happens in protected national parks all over the world. But the Media system operates more like an open-source consensus protocol.
A consensus protocol based on spiritual reverence rather than the threat of prosecution. That's a great way to put it. They don't have a written penal code or armed guards. They have an unbreakable cultural code of respect.
So it's about belief.
Exactly. Because the entire community views the forest as a living entity that sustains them. Violating the Gaeta's directives isn't just a crime, it is considered a profound moral failure.
And this spiritual consensus protocol has successfully protected the multi-million-dollar teak trees, the biological tripwires like the sloth bear and the tigers.
Yep.
But the absolute greatest triumph of this ancient system is hiding deep in a highly isolated, almost mythical area called the Colamarca region.
Yes. This is the mystery we alluded to at the very beginning of our deep dive. Colamarca is the final bastion of a genuine giant.
To understand how isolated this giant is, we have to map the hydrology of the area. The Colamarca region is defined by three massive rivers: the Wanganga, the Pranahita, and the Indravati.
Beautiful rivers.
Very. But during the dry season, they're just boundaries. During the monsoon, though, these rivers completely transform. They flood violently, rapidly rising and completely cutting off entire tribal villages for weeks at a time. No one goes in, no one comes out.
And that intense flooding creates a highly volatile dynamic. The rising waters force the apex predators, the tigers, bears, and leopards, onto the same shrinking patches of high ground as the human settlements.
Oh man, so they're all trapped together.
Yeah, they are pushed into incredibly close proximity, demanding a level of cautious coexistence that is hard for a modern city dweller to even fathom.
I can't even imagine. But if you manage to navigate past those flooded borders, moving toward the breathtaking confluence of the Indravati and Pranahita rivers, you enter a space that feels entirely separated from the modern timeline.
You are entering the vicinity of the Bamragar and Chaprala sanctuaries, and the biological diversity here is just staggering.
What else lives there?
Well, the source material notes species like the barking deer, locally called a kotri, which emits a sharp sound exactly like a dog when it senses a predator.
A deer that barks, that is so strange.
Right. You also find the hill myna bird, which possesses an uncanny, almost eerie ability to perfectly mimic the intonation of human voices echoing through the dense canopy.
Which would definitely add to the creepiness factor at night.
Oh, for sure. But if you push even deeper past those sanctuaries, walking for hours through dense undergrowth where cell signals completely vanish, you finally arrive at the heart of Colamarca.
And this is where you find the secret: the purebred wild water buffalo.
Yes. And we need to strip away any preconceived notions of a docile farm animal chewing cud in a pasture.
Right, this isn't a domestic cow.
No, the purebred wild water buffalo is an entirely different class of megafauna. It is listed as endangered by the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, meaning global scientific bodies, have placed it on the red list.
Meaning there is an extremely high risk of total extinction in the wild.
Exactly.
And the physical scale of this creature is terrifying. It is roughly double the size of a standard domestic buffalo. But its most defining, menacing feature is the horns.
Oh, the horns are unbelievable.
The source documentation notes that the horn span on a mature adult can stretch up to 2 meters wide.
2 meters. Let that sink in.
I mean, imagine a full-grown human being lying completely flat, horizontally, across the horns of this animal from tip to tip. That is the width we are talking about.
It's massive.
It possesses this heavy, ancient gaze, and the sheer muscle mass of the animal means that even a starving tiger will calculate the odds and almost always choose to walk away rather than engage a herd of them.
Yeah, the fact that this specific purebred giant still exists in Colamarca is nothing short of an ecological miracle.
Yeah.
Historically, the purebred wild water buffalo had a massive range, roaming all the way from the floodplains of Assam across the entire breadth of central India.
But human expansion systematically erased them. Industrial hunting for sport, massive deforestation projects that cleared their grazing lands, and continuous crossbreeding with domestic cattle.
It just slowly wiped out their pure genetic lines almost everywhere else on the subcontinent.
They vanished across thousands of miles of territory, yet they survived in this isolated pocket of Colomarca for one very specific reason: the Maidia tribe.
Exactly. The Maidia did not view this 2-meter horned beast as a trophy or as a threat to be eradicated. They viewed the wild water buffalo as a deity.
To the tribe, the buffalo is the physical embodiment of the forest's identity.
Consequently, they simply refused to hunt it. While the rest of the industrialized world was shooting them or paving over their habitats, the Maidia drew a line in the soil and protected them.
That's incredibly powerful.
It really is. No international environmental NGO saved this prehistoric giant. No government mandate or modern legislation pulled it back from the brink. It was saved by an indigenous community living entirely off the electrical grid who consciously chose spiritual reverence and restraint over exploitation.
Which really brings all the threads of this deep dive together perfectly. We started our journey stepping into a pitch-black forest guarded by invisible canopy watchers and explosive biological tripwires. We navigated a hostile, unhackable geography that successfully repelled the British Empire's logging ambitions. And at the absolute center of it all, we found an ancient consensus protocol led by a village elder holding the line for an endangered, 2-meter horned prehistoric beast.
It serves as a profound masterclass in what it actually means to live with an ecosystem, rather than just extracting value from it.
Absolutely.
We currently live in an era defined by modern panic over climate collapse. We host endless global summits, trade carbon credits, and debate theoretical models for sustainability. The Gond and Maidia tribes aren't debating sustainability. They have been successfully executing it in the harshest conditions for thousands of years.
They mastered the exact principles that modern scientists are now desperately trying to reverse engineer and teach the rest of us. And that is the crucial takeaway for you to reflect on after listening to this. We've been conditioned to equate resilience and progress with technology. We assume the future of the planet relies on designing a new smart city, writing a better app, or inventing some high-tech atmospheric scrubber to fix the environment.
But the enduring secret of Gacciaroli proves otherwise.
Right. It proves that true strength isn't housed in a microchip, and it isn't enforced by a gun. True strength is found in the soil you choose to protect like a mother.
It really challenges our entire definition of progress. Are we truly inventing a better, more sustainable future, or are we just slowly, painfully attempting to relearn the baseline truths that the Maidia tribe never forgot?
It leaves you with a very personal framework to consider. Look at the resources in your own life, your time, your local environment, your community's assets. Ask yourself, what is your personal green gold? What is that incredibly valuable thing you possess that is vulnerable to extraction?
That's a great question.
And more importantly, do you have a Geta? Do you have a guiding principle, a boundary, or a consensus protocol protecting that asset from your own endless greed?
That is the ultimate enduring lesson of the impenetrable forest.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Maharashtra's Amazon. Keep questioning your boundaries, respect the wild, and we will see you next time.